Well, hey, Brady Leavold, thank you for being here today, man. And for first question, for those of you who don't know who you are, please tell them why you're here today.
Yeah, well, first off, I'm very lucky to be here and thanks for having me. Um, Quick Cole's notes. I grew up with the same dream as most young boys in Canada do of being
Hmm.
an NHL hockey player. In fact, an NHL superstar. That was my goal, right?
Hmm.
And I found solace in hockey early on. I went through some troubling things as a kid, pretty hard divorce with my parents, and then was sexually abused shortly thereafter, and that kind of put me on this trajectory of I guess looking for a way out of that pain. And early on, I found that through hockey, and I did as much of it as possible. So I always say, when you do something a lot, you get pretty good at it, and that's
Hmm.
sort of what happened. But as I started to get, my skills as a hockey player started to develop, my mental health was deteriorating every single day. And as I got older, started to hit some pretty high levels of hockey, Western Hockey League at 16, and you think it's a dream. And, I'd been hiding all of this stuff for so long, everything that was going on with me. I mean, I didn't tell anybody that I was sexually abused, like not
Hmm.
a single soul, not my parents, nobody knew. And, yeah, moving away from home, it was tough. And I struggled immensely through junior hockey with mental health and early onset of addiction. And that was something that was never going to be a part of my life, right? Drugs were never going to be a part of my life. I think alcohol was acceptable at the time.
Hmm.
It was part of the hockey culture and really just part of the culture in general. I think we see it everywhere where we go. Watch a hockey game, have a beer, go out for dinner, have a beer. It was just sort of like that was okay, but drugs were so far fetched from the reality of my life. Like it was never going to happen. And unfortunately, I made a choice to one night at a music festival to
Hmm.
go against everything I stood for. And that sort of opened the door to, trying anything else, right? It was like, well, if that's not that bad and I like the way it makes me feel initially, then, I try and I just wanted to do as much of it as possible. I didn't care about hockey anymore. It was more about relieving that pain. And so, I struggled through junior hockey, was still able to sign with the Tampa Bay Lightning. I know it sounds crazy. You struggle through junior hockey and you're still getting a contract, but it was a bad,
Hmm.
a couple suicide attempts and, missing games and practices because of my addiction and my mental health and quitting teams and, just not feeling like I was able to talk about it. And, just quickly, my first year pro, blew out my knee and was prescribed pretty
Hmm.
heavy painkillers, Oxycontin. And, I didn't really realize that they were going to treat my emotional pain probably more than they treated my physical pain. And in that moment, it felt like I found everything I was looking for. And little did I know it was basically doing synthetic heroin. And it didn't take long for me to eventually start doing heroin when my prescription was cut off and I couldn't find pills. And I didn't really understand what they were doing to my body with the whole withdrawal. And there's not a whole lot of education about that. Opiates and it's painkillers from doctors, and it can happen to athletes. It can happen to somebody working on a job or in a car accident or whatever. And you're in pain, so you think you take these painkillers. Next thing you know, you're physically dependent on them. And my life became about seeking and finding those pills, and I lost everything, my family, my hockey career, all my friends, you name it, I did it. Every horrible thing you can think of that a drug addict does. And it didn't take long for me to end up homeless and incarcerated
Hmm.
for 3 years. And just places that I never thought I would be. And let me tell you, it wasn't for a lack of trying. I went to treatment and I tried and did meetings and detoxes and all of it. And it just felt like I was never going to get out of it. And so there was, psych wards and suicide attempts. I can't even tell you the overdoses, everything. It would take forever to tell you all the stories. And, I'd given up. I'd given up completely and hadn't had skates on in 9 years and wanted to make a change. Like I always wanted to make a change. I wasn't happy with the way I was living, but it felt like I was stuck there. And, I understood, I had this pretty conscious moment that you can kind of, it sort of feels divine where I just sort of had this inclination where I had this decision to make one night where I was 2 weeks clean and, I'd lived this life for almost a decade, right? And that comes with it. There's more than just doing drugs that comes with that. It's when
Hmm.
you do that, it becomes a lifestyle almost. And the people you hang out with, like you have to change everything to get out of it. But I had this overwhelming sense that I needed to get my skates back on when I was about 2 weeks clean. And so that's what I did. And I put my skates back on and and instantly found that joy for just being on the ice. I was by myself. I didn't even have a stick. And I tell people, I don't skate without a stick, like period. But I knew I needed to get on the ice that day. It was on a lake up here in Muskoka, Ontario,
Yeah.
beautiful place. And um, yeah, and I just thought to myself, oh, how can I get back into hockey? There's no way I'm ever going to coach. There's no way I'm going to do anything because I went to jail and like parents are going to think I'm a nightmare, but maybe there's a way I can share my story. But at the time, I felt like I was the only hockey player, certainly that had
Mhm.
gone through that. And, I decided to start this podcast. It's now called Hockey to Hell and Back. And had no idea. Like I didn't have equipment. I didn't even have any friends. Like I didn't have social media. I
Mhm.
didn't have anything. And I just thought, okay, I'll borrow a computer because I was on welfare and had nothing, and I'll just start talking. And through doing that, I started to, get just countless messages of other hockey players and people in general who were struggling. And more importantly, I started to hear stories of hockey players specifically who had lost their battle with mental health and substance abuse, and they're no longer here. And you can, if this is video, you can see some of the pictures behind me.
Yeah.
All of those hockey players are no longer with us. And that's just a very small sample size. To my knowledge, there's 87. And so, in doing that, I didn't really have a plan. There was no grand plan of, speaking on stages or doing any of this or getting back into coaching. Like I just wanted to help one person, and I took that step. And by sharing my story, I decided to get honest for the first time in my life. And sorry, I'm a talker. I'm not giving you much of an opportunity to hop in.
That's okay.
But you
You
asked,
know,
and people they want to know, and I wasn't telling anybody. But it was the moment that I decided to take back my life and go grab that little 5-year-old boy's hand, and say, hey, like, that wasn't your fault. You don't have to live with this alone and trying to fight these battles alone. And you're 30. At the time, I was 33. Yeah, 33. And I made a decision. Like I'm a grown man, and I'm gonna speak honestly about it because I knew I wasn't the only one, but it certainly felt that way. And it wasn't easy. I did a lot of trauma abuse counseling and like a lot of stuff behind the scenes that people don't hear about because I don't talk about it a lot. But it's been trying, and I mean that was, I'm coming up to 3 years clean, 3 years that I've been doing this, and now I'm happy to say I'm back coaching, skills coach right from, I know you're in are you in North Bay? I do,
North Bay. Yeah.
yeah, I do some stuff up there in North Bay with the Trappers and a couple guys in the battalion, and like just back in hockey in a way bigger way. And that's something for me, but it never sat well with me that so many hockey players have passed away, and I wasn't willing to sit back idle and do nothing about it. I just couldn't. I
Mhm.
couldn't. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had very limited resources, a very limited network at the time. I had zero money, but I had a strong desire to want to be part of the solution, be part of that impactful change that needs to happen. And I think it needs to happen everywhere. I think just using hockey as that vehicle, we can get a lot of people to pay attention to this stuff if the hockey community and people in hockey are talking
Mhm.
about it, because that's just the way it is in Canada. Whether it's right or wrong, that's the way it is. So it's kind of this unique opportunity. I was like, well, maybe I can use hockey as the vehicle, but I always thought I was going to be this outcast, right? Like
Mhm.
nobody was really going to take me serious from the NHL or in guys I
Mhm.
played with, because, it's sort of waters that nobody wants to touch, nobody wants to talk about. But boy, was I wrong, because I got a ton of guys in the NHL who I talk to and support me and who are going through different things. And, and maybe more importantly, it's the grassroots, right? Like it's just the people, the young kids and the parents who have sort of embraced my story and embraced the stories of those that have passed away that I continue to share, and to help them have a greater understanding that this can happen to anybody, and that we
Mhm.
all need to come together and do more. And so that's why I started Puck Support. And it's kind of a long story, but it was just supposed to be a nonprofit or a charity, but it turned into a clothing line because that's all I could do. I bought a heat press and a vinyl cutter, and I was taught myself how to do all this stuff, which I never thought I would do, but I didn't have any other way to do it. Like this was it. And you can see my shirt says mental health
Yeah.
over hockey. Pressed that myself. Like a couple weeks ago, there's someone in there pressing shirts right now in our workshop. So the clothing line to carry the message, but that was sort of just a means, not a means to an end, because it's going to continue to go, but just something to keep the message going, because I didn't have the
Mhm.
$10,000 to start a charity and wasn't really asking people for money because that's all I did in my addiction. But I'm happy to say that the clothing line has been tremendously successful. There's multiple stores that want to start to carry it, and that's one thing that we do. But the other side of it is that we're now a registered nonprofit on our way to getting our charitable status, which is a trying process, but we're going to get there. And the end goal is to really ignite change in substance abuse and mental health by setting the hockey world in motion, right? And that opens the doors for people outside of hockey as well. And yeah, I'm here because I've gone through a lot in my life, and I think we all go through things in our life. And there was a time not too long ago, just a few short years ago, where I didn't have a voice. I didn't feel like I had a voice. I didn't feel like I could tell people what was going on with me. I felt like nobody cared about me, nobody, all of that. And I know there's people out there right now who feel the exact same way, and that's why I do this. That's why I say yes to these podcasts. I don't care if somebody has one follower or a million followers. It doesn't matter, because you just never know who might be listening and who needs to hear that message. So that's why I'm here. I want to be a part of this solution moving forward, for the greater good of humanity and mental health and substance abuse education, because I feel like whether it would have stopped me or not, I'm not sure. But I really think that if there was an opportunity for me to feel more comfortable and come forward and share and talk about some of the stuff, maybe one, I never go down that path. Maybe two, I'm able to find my way out of it quicker, because I'm very lucky. The overdose, 10 plus overdose is easy, where I'm waking up on gurney, parents in the hospital, heart rate monitors, the whole thing. Like, that was my life. And here I stand today, or sit right now. My life, I still struggle every single day, every day. It's still a grind. I don't have it all figured out, but I don't use drugs anymore, and I'm not living in that pain, because I know there's a better way to deal with it. And I'm back, like I said, back coaching hockey, NHL players, right down to young boys and girls. So it's been quite the turnaround. It's an amazing story, and I don't say that because, oh, here's one guy who turned his life around. That's not why I say this is an amazing story. The story is that somebody, and that somebody just happens to me, took a chance and started to get vulnerable, started to share, and people didn't turn their backs on me. That's the story, right? People were there, community was there, people I never knew, people that I did know, people I hadn't talked to in a long time. That's the story. There have been so many incremental parts of my recovery and my success in recovery, that maybe people are like, oh, Brady did a lot of work. Yeah, I did a lot of work, but there's a lot of people that continue to help me every single day, and have helped me get to where I'm at and where I want to go. And without those people, without me allowing those people into my life and sharing and being vulnerable, I'm simply not sitting here.
That's I was telling you, by the grace of some higher power, I was just going through Instagram a couple of weeks ago, and I saw a post by Nipissing University saying that you were going to speak there, and I didn't know who you were. I didn't know what your story was. I started Googling your name, reading the stories, like Sportsnet had the big piece on you, and then you start digging, and you start reading about who you are, your career. I took a shot in the dark and reached out to you, and was able to attend the event, which was it was powerful, man. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like, my head hurt after. Like, it brings up so much emotion, the stuff that sounds so familiar, right? And you brought up a couple things and what you were just talking about, that I'm just a guy. I don't know who sees this, who listens to this, but there's going to be one person somewhere that
That's right.
sees this, right? That says, you know what, that resonates with me, or I know somebody, or that's happening to me. And it's just funny how things work out that way, that now we're able to connect, right? And
Absolutely. And,
yeah,
and on
and
top of that, you have a great mustache. So happy to
thanks.
connect with you anytime.
It's a lifestyle, man. It's a lifestyle. I can't get rid of it now. So
I know.
I had to do something when I was stuck inside during COVID. So I was like, let's just grow a mustache and see what happens.
Yeah, I did something similar, but it's funny because it's not really funny, but I can laugh about it now. It was really trying times during the pandemic there for a lot of people. And I have so much compassion for that.
Mhm.
I thrived though. Like, people you have to remember, I just spent 3 years in jail. So lockdown for me was different than what
Mhm.
lockdown was on the outside. And though there was many people, and I was able to help a few people, and a little bit here and there doing what I can, but I know that there's this immense amount of people who are struggling right now, coming out of the pandemic. And these substance abuse is highlighted, mental health, suicide, all of it. And now is the time more than ever that people need to come together. And so, being able to come up to Nipissing University was a fantastic experience. Denise LaFrance Horning from Nipissing University, she sits on the board for Puck Support as well, and she's just an incredible human. And Dr. Rob Graham, who also spoke, and just to see the faces and the hockey teams there, and I've done it quite a few times, and I love doing it. And never once, whether it be on Zoom or whether it be in person, have I ever not had like multiple people either come up to me after, send me an email after, and it's sort of bittersweet because on one hand, it's really great that people are able to come forward and they feel comfortable to tell me stuff. Like, people come up to me and they'll be like, "Hey, I was sexually abused when I was 7 and I haven't told anybody." And you're the first person I'm telling. I can't tell you how many times that has happened in the last 3 years, or people who are battling with substance abuse. So on one hand, it brings me, you know, hope in a sense that people are talking about. But on the other side of it, I'm thinking, well, if there's a couple people talking, how many people aren't talking? How many people are
Mhm.
suffering in silence right now? Like, that's somehow my brain works. And so, to be in the position to be able to, help people find their voice is something that means a lot to me, and something that um, you know, I, I had people like that, right? Guys like Sheldon Kennedy and Theron Fleury. And though it took me some time, I held on to those guys very closely from a young age. Especially Sheldon Kennedy, because he came out first. And, they've been huge supports of mine. They've been on my podcast. And, Sheldon was a huge support for me when I started to share my story and try to navigate what this looks like dealing with trauma. So I think it's really important for us as humans to have, examples of people who have, battled through things, or whatever, achieved something, like anything, right? Like, just an example of, hey, this can be done. Like if I can get out of this, so can you. And I say that to people. Like, I promise, if I can do it, I know it's a stupid saying. I don't like that saying. If I can do it, you can do it. Let me tell you, it doesn't get any lower. You cannot get any lower than where I was at here in Canada, being homeless on the streets, in Hastings, in and out of jail, psych wards. Like, I'm not sure there's much of a lower place that you can go for, like, here in Canada. We're a first world country. And to feel that hopelessness, right? I know what that feels like, that immense hopelessness where you just want to die because you feel shame and guilt and that it's never going to end. And I was in that for over a decade. And now I've been out of it for almost 3 years. And it feels like I know all that stuff happened, but I can't even picture myself living that life. Like, again, like, I know it happened, but man, like, if you would have told me 3 years ago that I could, never
Mhm.
mind like what I'm doing and everything else, just the fact that I could remain clean for longer than one day and somewhat have a life, I would have laughed in your face. And here I sit. And I promise, if I'm able to get out of this, I think anybody can. And just before you hop in, I
Yeah.
always like to say this, because if there are people who are listening, I think oftentimes, we think that the message is always for somebody who's struggling directly. But what I've found in, I call it my research in the last 3 years, is that more often than not, it's the family members and loved ones who are reaching out in desperation to find answers
Mhm.
for their son, their daughter, their husband, their wife, whoever it may be. And my message is always this to those people is, it's great that you're reaching out to me for support, and I'll do anything I can to help you. But you got to let other people in, the people who are in around you, family members, people in general. They don't want other people to know what's going on with them. And what I've seen is that when we limit the supports that can come in to help somebody, I think especially as parents, we think, I'm a parent, like, we think as parents, we know we have all the answers and we're going to fix all our child's problems. So that's not the reality. Sometimes you need to let other people in. Oftentimes, almost every time, you need to let somebody else in when we're talking mental health and substance abuse. And unfortunately, I've had many conversations with people who have lost their son, their daughter, and it's always the same. conversation. We wish we would have done more. We wish we
Mm,
could have reached out and felt like we could have asked up instead of feeling like we have to keep this in our house and not let anybody know. Because by doing that, you limit the love and the support that can come in. I know there's aunts and uncles and grandparents, and like they don't even know what's going on inside their own family because everyone wants to keep it. And that's for me, that's a big one. Like you gotta allow people in. It doesn't mean everybody, but we all have those people. And I think being honest and by being honest, it keeps us accountable, right? That's a big thing for
mhm,
me is once I started to share my story and put it out there and say, hey, this is what I'm doing and I'm clean. And every day people are like now checking, like, is he still on the right track? Is he
mhm,
still on the right track? And people are supporting me and giving me words of encouragement. And it's enough to keep me going versus if I'm sitting there by myself trying to white knuckle it on my own or with like one person supporting me, we're going to do this on our own, we're not telling anybody. That's a pretty lonely spot to be in. So I always like to tell people, it's not a unique situation if you or someone you love is going through any of this stuff. Unfortunately, it's way too common. It's just not very common that people are talking about it and don't want to leave it to when it's too late. And
mhm, mhm.
yeah, so I just want to throw that in there. I
Yeah,
just think it's a really important piece.
yeah. Thank you, Brady. And there's a couple things you talked about in there is being honest, right, and not keeping things in. And it's funny, I've been blessed to speak with people like you, Clint Malarchuk, Michael Landsberg, Corey Hirsch, people who are
Yeah.
very open about what they've been through. And it's weird because before I started talking about anxiety and depression and some of the stuff I went through, I told them more about myself than I did my own family, which is just it's bizarre, right? It makes no sense. But
But on one hand, sorry to cut you off there, but on
yeah,
one
yeah,
hand,
yeah, yeah.
right, it doesn't really, right? When we think about it, it's like, well, that doesn't really make sense. This is our family. But it does make sense because I think when we're talking to our family, if you're married or if you have kids, like you don't want to disappoint anybody. You don't want to let
Hmm.
anybody down. But then all of a sudden you get on a podcast with Michael Landsberg, Corey Hirsch, Clint Malarchuk, me. Here we are, the four of us, we're pretty open, right? And so
Yeah.
what that does is it like I told you earlier about people coming up to me and telling me all this
Hmm.
stuff, what that does is it breaks that barrier to entry to have that conversation. So I don't think, it is kind of like in the grand scheme of things, I look at that, I'm like, that is kind of like how do we get ourselves to a place where we're comfortable talking with our own households, with our own friends, support groups, all of that stuff. And maybe it starts with having a conversation with a guy like Corey Hirsch or Clint
Hmm.
Malarchuk. And now all of a sudden you're feeling empowered, right? To
Yeah.
take that back and to tell your family or to whoever you are. So I think, there's a piece to that that's like, it's kind of weird, but in a sense, it also makes sense. I would just like to see it a little,
Yeah.
like a little bit different. But I completely agree. I'm the same way. I am the same way. I have a way easier time telling a stranger kind of what's going on versus me going to my dad, right? Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
God, forget it. Now much better. I'm much better at now, but man, like I'm not telling anybody because the disappointment, it's hard to
Yeah.
deal with that. And on top of that, you're already feeling like crap, right? And you're down and out. And it's like, am I going to compound more stuff on top and more people worried and everything else? Excuse me. It's a really tricky situation. Um, Especially dealing with I'm sitting here talking about like addiction and stuff, and I haven't used drugs in almost 3 years, hard drugs, anyways. I will say, people listening, because they're gonna dig into my story. For me, people ask me about my recovery. If you want to know, like I'm big in the plant medicine space.
Hmm.
I've tried every pharmaceutical there is, every antidepressant, every antipsychotic, every you name it, I've done it. I was like a walking pharmacy at one point. I know everything about benzos and all. Like I've been on it all, and nothing worked for me. And so I went to microdosing mushrooms by the suggestion of a couple other former NHL guys and changed my life completely. Obviously, there's more that goes into it. It's a
Hmm.
daily
Hmm.
process of work. But when I say, people be like, oh, well, you microdose mushrooms. So I'm like, well, whatever. Like it's medicine. It comes from the ground. I'm not getting into this. If you take there's the thing is, sorry, I just like to talk about stuff and put it out there because
Yeah.
it's a really good way to frame it. And I think you look at things like cannabis and psilocybin or even like lion's mane, like mushrooms, all that stuff. There's great health benefits, but for so long it's been like blackballed, right? Like this
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
bad, this is horrible, and no one and everyone's just sort of like got that ingrained into their minds. But for someone like me who uses plant medicines and then I have a conversation with somebody who's, you know, in a recovery, AANA, whatever it may be, I totally support that. I think it's great. I think it works. But I talk to them and they're like, well, I don't really think you're sober. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. I'm like, are you on any antidepressants? Are you on any benzodiazepines? Because if you are,
Mhm.
and they are, I'm like, well, I guess you're not sober either, because that's a mood altering drug. Like if you really want to get technical. So I always tell people, if your life is not unmanageable and you're in a better place than you ever have been, and you're not hurting yourself or anybody else, which where I'm at, right? Like what works for me might not work for you. What works for you might not work for me.
Mhm. Mhm.
And for so long, trying to deal with my mental health and my addiction issues and my trauma, I had no idea who I was or what to do. I was trying to latch on to what anybody else was doing, how anybody else was talking in meetings. Oh, I got to get the lingo down. Oh, I got to do this. I got to act this way. All the while, I was never really finding out who I was and what I really needed and how I needed to nurture
Mhm.
myself. So that's when I stripped that all away and was able to, you know, just start to listen, you know, listen a little bit more to myself, and, you know, still working on that. But yeah, I didn't know where I was going with this, but I think it's just perspective, and,
Yeah.
you know, I don't abuse any of it or anything. Everything's with intention and mindful. And I'm in such a great place. I can't even tell you when it comes to that stuff. I never thought I'd be able to manage anything. Like I don't drink, I don't do
Mhm.
any of that stuff. Because I just don't like it. Now that I've realized and come out of it, I think of people that, you know, and that's the reality, but they work and they come home, they drink, they work, they come home, they drink, they work, they come home, they drink. And it's like, I don't like feeling like that, you know, and I don't want to
Yeah.
wake up hungover. I don't want to be dependent. I've really comes down to, and this is a really big one for me, and it's really hard to do because of the society that we live in. But I am doing my very best to do as much as what I want to do and like to do as possible. And that means my work, what I'm doing, how I'm spending my time. I have to love it. I have to have a
Mhm.
passion for it. Because if I don't, I'm going to be that guy who hates his job and comes home every day and wants to drink and wants to escape, and which is the loop that so many people are stuck in. And whether you're drinking or not, it's just that loop of waking up being like, oh, I don't want to, you know, and you know, it's tough because you need money and you need to survive and you need to do this stuff. But I've stripped my life down completely and I didn't have anything to lose. So big part of my recovery is spending as much time as I can doing the things that I love, that I'm passionate about. And that means speaking, that means coaching hockey,
Mhm.
that means, you know, volunteering, whatever I can do. It's not about me, like, oh, it's selfish. I want to do this for me. What my passion is really like getting out there and giving back, helping, you know, getting on the ice. And yes, some of the stuff I get paid to do, but that's my
Mhm.
job. And because I'm passionate about it and because I love it so much, I bring it like on the ice. I bring it, and I'm grateful that I'm in that position. I'm like, I'm at work right now. I'm working right now. I would pay to be out here with these kids. That's how I'm running my life. Like, you know, and that's why I feel very lucky to be able to do what I do. And it's helped me stay clean, right? Is
Yeah.
having that passion, that purpose, that community, that connection. Like those are four things that are so important, and I think are getting overlooked way more now than ever before with social media and technology. Everywhere you go, everyone's on their phones, and I'm guilty. You want to talk about addiction? This is my addiction, and I'm man enough to admit that I'm addicted to my phone. I think a lot of people are, and it's an issue for me. It's a serious issue. So it's like, did I replace one for the other with what I'm doing? I don't know, but what's the healthier alternative while I
Yeah.
try to figure it out? So I don't know. I'm kind of rambling, man. I don't know if you have any more questions. I'm an open book. We got some time too. We got like 20 minutes if you want to
Cool, man.
for a
Yeah,
bit.
I got a couple more, and obviously, passion is a big thing with you. You talked about a lot about it on here already. You talked about it at NU, and you've kind of touched on it already. But can you dive a little more into puck support and hockey to hell and back, and what that is and what you do, for yourself, the community, and the people involved.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. Because I'll be honest with you, I'm not a very, even on my own podcast, I don't really promote puck support or the things that I'm
Mhm.
doing. And it's sort of, I think maybe comes back to like a self-worth thing, and being kind of like, I don't bring it up on my own. So thank you for asking me that question,
Mm,
because it needs
of
to,
course.
I need to do a much better job at talking about it to get it out there. And yeah, I think I'll start with Hockey to Hell and Back. I mean, it was originally called Hockey to Heroin, The Road to Recovery. And a quick funny story. I remember Doug Gilmore is a friend of mine, been on my show a whole bunch. His older brother helped raise the initial money to start the Puck Support clothing line. Like, they've been incredible to me. And anyways, he came the first time he came. I think it was the second time he came on my show. It was like, I don't know, episode 60 or something. And I'm looking at this picture and it says Hockey to Heroin, The Road to Recovery. And then there's a picture of Doug Gilmore, episode whatever it was. And I'm like, like, he didn't care. He'd already been on the show. There had already been one of those pictures, but I'm like, I don't know. I don't know about that. Like, I think it's a catchy title. I think for a book, like, that's my book, Hockey to Heroin,
Hmm.
right? But for a podcast, I was like, we need to change it. So we changed the name to Hockey to Hell and Back after like 74 episodes. We've done 200 and something or whatever. I've been podcasting like crazy in the last 2 years, and I love it. But yeah, my podcast, I typically do them Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern. Sometimes it fluctuates because guys are playing like in the NHL, or they're on the road, or got people are busy. So we change the dates, but it's available on YouTube, also Facebook, but please don't go watch it on Facebook. I'm trying to grow the YouTube channel. Hockey, the number two, not spelt T-O, Hockey 2, Hell and Back. I don't know why I made it that way. I think I was just being lazy. Um, and yeah, we talk about mental health, we talk about substance abuse, and anything that comes up. It's not always about that. It's not, but primarily we get into the nitty gritty. Last night we had Aaron Volpatti on the show, just launched his book, and what a tremendous story. Guys like Kelly Rudy, we got Sam Gagne coming on.
Hmm.
Just a tremendous lineup of people who have come on and shared their story, and vulnerably. And it's been an awesome adventure, the podcasting game. It's really helped with networking, I think, too. I've met a lot of amazing people through having a podcast. So I think for anybody listening, if you want to start a podcast, start a podcast. Like, just do it. Like, I didn't even have a computer, I didn't even have headphones, I had jail shoes, one pair of pants, and like a thin Gong Show hockey hoodie, which is kind of ironic because I was a Gong Show at the time. No offense to them, I don't wear it now, I'm all Puck Support, but that's where I was at. And so I think, people out there, it's not about how many people listen to your show or anything like that. You have something to say, you want to do it, and you have a passion for it, do it. It changed my life significantly. And that's where I got my life back, was on my podcast. So Hockey to Hell and Back live Monday nights. It's also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all those places. It's pretty easy to find. Um, Puck Support, I mentioned a little bit about it. It was just supposed to be a charity, but we were able to start a clothing line with some, and then I think Dave Gilmore raised like $2,800 a couple years ago, and was like, I know it's not enough to do what you want to do, and I was really weird about taking money. It was,
Hmm.
because that's all I did in my addiction. I took, and it was a big deal. Someone sending me $28. I think I had 28 cents in my bank account when it happened, and all of a sudden I got $2,800, and I was a little nervous, but I never even for 1 second. And I was relatively, like, I don't even think I was a year clean at the time, or maybe just, yeah, like I think 9 months clean. So pretty fresh, and didn't really have access to money. I know I could go relate to my old ways and get whatever I needed,
Hmm.
but I wasn't doing that. But all of a sudden I have this money in my bank account. And there wasn't even a second that I hesitated. It felt so great to get that money, and right away was like, okay, how are we gonna do this? Like, what can we do? And I thought, oh, video, we'll get a professional video made, and we'll honor all those that we've lost at this point, and we'll lay out a great plan of how we're gonna do this. But then what? It's like, then that
Hmm.
money's gone, and that video is gone, and we're back to square one with this video where people are like, okay, and now what? So I scrapped that. And like I said earlier, I bought a heat press and a vinyl cutter, and started design logos myself, and slogans, and build a website, and do e-commerce and all that stuff. And we have people all over the world wearing Puck Support: Australia, Europe, tons, mostly here in like Ontario. Every rink I go into now, pretty much everyone,
Nice.
somebody there is wearing Puck Support, or if I walk in wearing it, they're like, hey, like, it's pretty cool. And so the clothing line, a big part of what we do is we put a name of a hockey player who's passed away in all of our stuff. So Matthew
Yeah.
Lazinski, that's where it all started. This was the first story that I heard of a hockey player who died of a fentanyl overdose. He played for the Sioux Greyhounds, got injured, prescribed painkillers, and then went on a life of addiction in jail, and unfortunately passed away of an overdose in 2017 of fentanyl, which was my drug of choice for 8 years. in that moment, I knew that I wasn't the only one. And that was sort of when I wanted to do something, the charity. I found out also my roommate from my time in the AHL, Mitch Fadden, same story. 2 weeks apart from Matthew, actually, fentanyl overdose. Two-time WHL All-Star, drafted by Tampa. Couldn't believe it. Honestly, and I don't say this lightly, might be the most skilled hockey player I ever played with. And we're talking some pretty damn good hockey players that I've been on the ice with, played with or against. We're talking Stamkos, Jamie Benn, Ryan Getzlaff, like you name it. And this Mitch just struggled with mental health and addiction, but man, he was good. And when I heard that he passed away, it kicked me into high gear. And that's why I kind of went forward with the clothing line. It was like, I didn't really want to start a clothing line. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I wanted to keep the message going. And that's sort of what's happened, because now people wear these hoodies and these shirts that say mental health over hockey. And I get messages because they walk in, they're like, hey, I was wearing my puck support hoodie at the rink last night. And this dad came over, and instead of, complaining about the coach not playing his kid or about this or that, he came up to me and was like, what does your shirt say? Mental. And then the next thing you know, we're talking about, our struggles or our kids' struggles. Like, it's creating these conversations in hockey rinks that probably weren't going to happen before. And I'm not there. Nobody that's related to puck support is there. It's just happening because of this messaging. And, and then you can share the stories of whoever's in your shirt. Amanda Todd, I'm not sure if you remember the Amanda Todd story. So she's actually from my hometown. I was her skills coach. And, very sad story, cyberbullying, and ended up taking her own life at 14 years old. So that's a way to keep their stories going. But quickly too, I'm very proud to say that we are a registered non-for-profit, and it took a long time to get there. We have an incredible board of directors with doctors and retired staff sergeants from the OPP, like, cops on the board. Like, it's pretty cool, man. Like, I could get emotional thinking about it. But man, there's a lot of work to do. We're planning some fundraisers, and it's the long road, right? Like I always say this, and I think there's a lot of people doing a lot of amazing things, and they want to start things. And sometimes these people are retired NHL players, and they have lots of money, and they're able to just be like, here's the money, build a team, go do this. I didn't have that luxury. And I'm so glad that I didn't have that luxury, because my hands are all in, like my hands are on everything. And it's been great for me personally, having to work, like literally work, and not have handouts. Because I'll be honest, everything kind of came easy to me in life. School was easy, girlfriend's easy, hockey was always easy. I didn't train really. Like, I was the guy who didn't really have to train, and still kind of whatever, just go with it. And I think that was because I was scared of, like, if I work hard, like seriously scared of success, right? Or working so hard and giving your all and scared of failure. There's both sides of that. And I just put all that stuff aside, and I was like, you know what? No one's coming to save me. No one's coming to do this for me. And you're going to have to figure it out. And let me tell you, there's been days where I just want to walk away, where I'm like, I can't, because I feel, not now, but in the past, where like, I can't do this. Like, I'm not sure I have the capacity to bring all of this together, and the resources and the money, and it became overwhelming. And the amount of messages I'm getting, where I know people are struggling, and I just want to do something so bad to just relieve some of that for just a few people. And, I realized somewhere along the line that it wasn't going to be about puck support or Bell Let's Talk or whatever organization you want to talk about, right? It's not going to be about one organization. It's going to be about community. And community for me looks like all of these organizations. And I've always been very, very clear from day one that it's never just about puck support. And it's certainly not about me. It's not called the Brady Leavold Foundation. In fact, I don't want to be the face of puck support. I just had to be, because nobody else was doing it. Like, I couldn't pay somebody else to do it, so I had to do it. But community is people coming together. And if we want a way out of this, right? If we want a way out of the overdose crisis, if we want a way out of, seriously, the mental health crisis that people aren't really acknowledging but exists. I think we know, but no one's really calling it a crisis. I'm calling it a crisis. we can look to Puck Support or Bell Let's Talk or some government or Hockey Canada to come change something. And that's great. And I hope that all of these organizations, including Puck Support, can all work together to help on that mission.
Hmm.
That's my goal. I don't care to get Puck Support if there's an event and we could help, but we're not going to get any um, I don't know, credit or whatever you want to call it. I don't care. I don't care. It's not about that. But for some organizations, it is like that. And so I realize that it's going to be the power of the people.
Hmm.
Wherever you are, in your workplace, in your hockey dressing room, in your school, we all need to be better and stop waiting for somebody to come fix the problems. When we all have the answers and the solutions within inside of ourselves, we just need to pay attention, be a little bit nicer, more compassionate, a little bit more kind,
Hmm.
and a little bit more community based. And you'd see, I don't know about you, but I remember when I was a kid, I had such a great neighborhood, like great neighborhood. All through spring and summer, they had something called the lanai, where every neighbor, every day, I swear to God, every day, they'd be out there and drinking beers. I know that's not great, but sitting around, they're eating appetizers, they're wheeling a TV out to watch the Stanley Cup finals on the lawn, like community, man. Like, without that, I don't think my dad as a single dad makes it without my neighbors that supported, were there to pick up when he couldn't get back from work or that I needed a ride to practice in the morning. It's people helping people. That's how we get out of this. And as soon as we all realize that we all have the power to make that difference, that's how we get out of this. Like once we realize that. And I think it's such a large task to take on, right? Like all of it.
Hmm.
Um, but we all have that in us where we can little differences. You're not going to fix it overnight. I'm not
Yeah.
sitting here saying you're going to end the overdose crisis. You're never going to see another overdose or that you're going to never see another suicide. That's wishful thinking, but the reality is it's not going to happen. But how do we mitigate that? How do we get somebody from going, or being in the position I was in or going in the trajectory that I was in to getting to the place kind of where I'm at today? Like, or I think the most important thing is being proactive.
Hmm.
Don't wait until crisis. We talked about this. Do you want kids? Got to get it early. You got to start. Not one day a year in school where someone comes in and talks. I think that's a huge piece. Not like 3 days of the week where you're spending 3 hours talking about mental health. This stuff is more important than graphing a circle on a chart or a squared plus b squared equals what. Like I haven't used that once in my adult life, not once. There might be people that do because that's their field.
Hmm.
Not me. Not me. How about geography? Liked it, but not me. I'm using my phone now. Like there's just so much time. How about finances? They didn't teach us anything about that, which also
Yeah.
can contribute to mental health because you're all of a sudden 18, 19 and you're like, oh shit, I got to get married. I got to buy a house. I got to do this. And nobody's taught you about credit or any of this. Like there's just so many holes. And it needs to be talked about every single day, 365 days a
Yeah.
year. Um, allowing people to find their voice and to have a safe space to share.
Hmm.
That's how we save lives.
Awesome. You know what? You touched on so many things that were, that
Sorry.
can affect. No, no, like anybody that watches this can take something away, right? And I think, my biggest takeaway from your presentation was, I think you mentioned it, that there's people in this room that are hiding something, right? You can see it. They're putting on that brave face, but they're not saying anything, and no one's asking that question. It's just asking someone if they're okay, right?
That's right.
Reaching out, saying hi, how are you doing?
Yeah,
And it's not a sign of weakness. It's nothing like that. It's just making sure that people are okay.
yeah,
And I think it starts with that. And you know what? There's so much I can take away from this conversation. It's been an honor, you know, having you on and speaking with you and just listening to what you're doing, right? Because it's about how you can help others, you know, and
man.
that's what
By
it's about.
help, by us helping others, right? Like there's something to it. Like more than anything, I just want to help people. But by helping others, it feels pretty damn good too, right? And it allows us, if we can get outside of ourselves, even if it's just for a short period of time, and go be of service to another human, for that time, it's not about you. It's not about, it's not
Hmm.
about me in that moment. And that to me is just so powerful, right? And if you can make somebody's day, like I go out of my way to make people's day, and I always have. Even when I was in addiction, I was just kind of like that. For example, if I see an older lady who I can tell who has put in the work to look good today and dressed up, and even if and she's not attractive to me at all or anything, but I pick up on that, I will go up to her and be like, "Hey, I just want to let you know that you look really beautiful today." Right? Things
Hmm.
like that can change somebody's day. In fact, I did that. I got a really, I don't know, I don't know how much time we have here. I got some time. I'm not getting picked up for another till 12:20. Um, but I got an email out of the blue about 3 months ago from this girl I went to high school with. And I'll be honest, at first I didn't really recognize her name, and we
Hmm.
weren't really friends. But she wrote me this really, really just, I've got a lot of amazing messages, but this one maybe is right at the top of the list, anyways, top three for sure. And she just went on to say basically that, she was really so, because she read the newspaper article in the Vancouver newspaper, and so she reached out to me and she said, "I'm really sorry that you went through all that." She goes, "I can't imagine uh, that you were going through that." She went on to say, I'm not trying to sound arrogant or anything, but she's like,
Hmm.
you were the most popular guy in school. You were the hockey player. You dated the prettiest girl in our school. Um, all of this stuff." And she goes, "I would have never thought that you were going through this." And she goes, and she goes, "You know what?" She goes, "We didn't have many interactions through high school because you had a different friend group." She goes, "But I'll never forget on our high school graduation night, you came up to me and told me that I looked beautiful." And she goes, "I never forgot that the most pot," and she, just her words, "Whether I was or I wasn't, I don't care." Because I look back at me at 17, I'm like, that guy was lost. That guy was a loser. I was a nice person. I didn't bully people or anything, but I was a bit of a loser. I didn't know who I was, right? I think just
Hmm.
whatever, trying to be what anybody wanted me to be. And so I'm not happy with the way I was at that age. But when I hear that, and she's like, "I never forgot that for the rest of my life, that the most popular boy in school paid me a compliment."
Hmm.
And so all these years later, like that still
She
makes
still
me
remembers that.
feel good.
Yeah.
Right. And and I just share that because those are the little impacts. Like those are the little conversations that didn't cost me a thing. It cost me literally 3 seconds of my time just to pay a nice compliment to somebody who maybe I typically hadn't talked to, but I do vaguely remember paying her that compliment after she told me. And I think I did it to a few people that night. It was just, I noticed and I was trying to lift people up, and it was an opportunity to make somebody's day. Like, why wouldn't we all do that when we have the opportunity
Hmm.
to do that? Right. The other day I was at Stick and Puck up in near Ottawa, and some kids like, "Oh, is that the new True Stick?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, I'm like, "There's another one on the bench." Right. And I'm very lucky because I'm sponsored by True, and, I'm
Hmm.
not, I get some stuff here and there. And it's a $500 stick, man, $450 stick. And I'm like, "There's another one on the bench. You can go grab it." And I just see the joy in this kid's face, right? He was like 16. I could tell that he didn't come from money. His gear was run down. He had an old True stick with these old True gloves. So I was like, okay, he's a True guy. So that's gonna go. I'm like, "Go use this stick." And just the way he was shooting the puck, and you could see, and he's looking at it. And I got him on video, and he's looking at the stick, and he's just like, "Oh, man." I'm like, "Dude, you can keep that stick, man. Like that's yours. Like I don't need that. Like how, like and now I'm messaging him, and he's like, "I can't believe you gave me that stick." And it doesn't have to be a stick. It could be holding the door for somebody. It's you
Yep.
know that means so much more to other people, and it also meant more to me. Seeing the joy in his face. What the hell am I going to do with it? I got a couple more here at home, and I'm pretty sure if I need another one, I could get one, and I could buy one if I had to. But he couldn't, and he was just
Yeah.
so in love with this stick. And it was just that opportunity. And like, I don't say this because I'm like, I need people to be like, "Oh, Brady, you do this." And it's no, I share this because it can seriously make a difference in somebody's life.
Yep.
You never know where somebody may be at, and saying, "Hey, you look beautiful today," or, "Hey, you look great today," or, just saying hi to somebody, acknowledging them, eye contact, looking them in the eyes, not talking while you're on your phone. And I'm bad for this myself. I'm like texting and talking, but you really want to have a conversation, put your phone down, look the people in the eyes, give them your time, give them your energy, and see how that impacts somebody's life. We're missing that. So that's
Yeah.
why I share that. I do stuff like that all the time. Me and my girlfriend do, and other people. That's just sort of what we do because we love to do it. We don't do it because we want accolades or for people to pat us on the back.
Hmm.
We only share the very few on social media. I'll share a few here and there of what we're doing to hopefully inspire other people to do it, because
Yeah.
more of us need to be in that giving state. And it doesn't have to be monetary. It could be time. It
Hmm.
could be so many things. It could be a nice compliment. And we once again, we all carry the power to change the world, one small act of kindness at a time.
You know what? I don't think we could end it any better. Like that's perfect, Brady. Like I think, whoever watches this, whoever sees it, it's an amazing story. You've been through more than anyone can imagine. And no one can step in your shoes, but you're able to share what you've learned with so many people that can't help themselves now have the opportunity to listen to you, right? If you said, if I can get through this, you can too. It's true, right?
Yeah.
And that's what this is about. And I'm honored to be able to listen to your story, speak with you today, and I immensely appreciate that, man.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having, yeah, thank you for having me. And, it means a lot to me. You reach out and, we don't really know each other, but hopefully there's an
Yeah,
opportunity for us to connect in the future.
sure.
Um, yeah, you interesting. You say, walk in my shoes. I think, everyone has that different pair of shoes, but I don't want anybody to ever have to walk in the shoes that I was wearing. And that's why I'm doing this. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, it's last thing I'll say is just remember, everyone, you're not alone. You're not even close. You may feel like you're alone. There's days where I still feel lonely and I feel alone, be honest, but underneath it, I know that I'm not. And the power lies in me because I know I have those people that I can count on. I'm very
Mhm.
grateful for those people that love and support me. And in turn, I can love and support them. But it's on us individually. It's on me. If you're listening, it's on you to utilize those supports. Nobody can help you unless you want to be helped, and oftentimes you need to ask for that help. So, anyways, yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
if there's anything I can do for you or whatever, whenever you post this or whatever, let me know and I'll share it and try to get some eyes on it for you. But I
Sounds good, man.
greatly appreciate it. And next time I'm in the Bay, I'll let you know.
Sounds good, man. Thank you.
All right. Thanks,
Appreciate your
Devin. You have a
time.
great day,
Have a
man.
good one. You too,
Okay.
bud. Bye.
Ciao.